Hello and welcome to the Warhammer 40k video. Today's video is going to be something slightly different, which you can probably tell from the title. Which is, we're not going to be doing like a list review or army tactics or a battle report or anything like that. I'm actually going to take a shot at explaining to you what I think should be done to fix Warhammer 40k 7th edition. And the reason for doing this video is there's been some leaks online or reveals, sort of pre-release reveals by Games Workshop of what direction they're taking 8th edition in, which obviously isn't out yet, but that's what it's given us a bit of a sneak preview of what to expect. This has created some huge umming and ahhings and nerd raging, and some people are rejoicing, and some people say, oh, it's getting the Age of Sigmar treatment, and some people are being like, that would be great, and others are saying, well, it's not the Age of Sigmar treatment, it's just they're changing some other things. So I don't like jumping on bandwagons. I did actually consider doing like a reaction video to that, but I don't like jumping on bandwagons because just feels like a bit of a sellout move to do. But rather than talking about those leaks or whatever, if anyone wants, I can send them. I can put a link in the description to a thread which goes over the links and the nerd rage and everything on Daka. So rather than, like I said, rather than doing my opinion on why Warhammer 40k is fucked and Age of Sigmar's wank and all that blah 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 nerd rage video, I'd just go and do a different kind of video, which is what I think should be done to fix 7th edition. Now, I don't like using, before we get into it, I know it's a bit of a long intro, but I don't like using the word fix, because one thing I want to make abundantly clear now is that this video is not going to be a rant video. We don't really, this channel's a bit ranty, but, it's not going to be a rant video. This is not me. I get very, very annoyed with people that go, 40k is broken. It's unplayable. Ugh. It's like, well, no, it clearly isn't unplayable because I'm playing it every Tuesday and every weekend. If it is unplayable, holy fuck, what am I doing? Am I hallucinating? You know what I mean? Like, so 40k is playable. The problem with 40k is that it is unbalanced in many ways, but the unbalance doesn't even really come from individual codexes or rules. It more comes from the fact that that 40k has been around for a long time, and power gamers know the rule sets and have got a certain kind of mindset, I should say, where they can exploit every tiny little sort of crack and hole, and some just obvious ones. So this is going to be me just taking a look at the broad brush things of how I would fix or how I would balance 40k, because it is playable, but there are some things that get abused. Okay? So the first thing that I would do is I would redo the ally system. Now, I wouldn't remove allies. A lot of people say, oh, remove allies, it's bullshit. It's like, well, no. Because let's be honest, some people have bought entire armies based around allies. And a lot of players have really fluffy allied armies. I, myself included, my scions. I have, a mixture of Space Marine Scouts and Speeders and, or I should say my Arbites and Scions in Tauroxes, and that creates my Arbites army. And that's a fluffy army. It's not particularly competitive, but it's a cool army which functions thanks to allies. But I think the problem is at the moment is that allies is just way too open to abuse. Everyone knows about Wolfstar. Everyone knows about Super Friends list, where you just take a bunch of random characters that would never ever work together on the battlefield, and you mash them together into units, and you create an invisible Death Star, and it just fucks everything over. So I think allies should still be in the game. But I think they should be. Let's be honest. Let's not go over the top here. Let's tone down allies. I've got a very simple solution for this, and it's something that I've been playing a lot. This is like a house rule kind of thing that we've been doing a lot in my gaming group at the moment, which is you can take a CAD and an allied detachment, and there are no battle brothers. That's it. Essentially, how you treat allies is two allied forces working together, not two allied forces converging into one blob mass army. No, just, for example, the Inquisition has called upon some local guard to help fight with him, or the Space Marines have, or he's requisitioned, or two Space Marine chapters have come together. They're not intermingling. The captain from one Space Marine chapter will stay with his unit, and the captain from another chapter will stay with his guys, and they're working together, but they're two separate, distinct forces. So that's what I feel. That would save a lot of. That would reduce a lot of unbalance in the game. You wouldn't have any Wolf Star anymore. You wouldn't have any Super Friends lists anymore, and it would just completely tone down those overpowered, abused lists. Because I think this is a fundamental thing that you're going to notice in my theme is the more freedom Games Workshop has given players, the more unbalanced the game has got. Back in sort of 4th and 5th edition, you only had your force organisation chart, and there was no super heavies allowed, and there's a bunch of other stuff like that, and it was like, okay, too much. And now they've got rid of all that kind of stuff, and it's like, well, you can do whatever the fuck you want now. And you can take whatever the fuck you want. Pretty much you can do whatever the hell you want. We're basically playing Unbound Apocalypse in 7th edition. And because of that, people are abusing it. It's as simple as it gets. So, number one, like I said, fix allies. You're allowed one CAD plus one allied detachment. No battle bro shit. No levels of ally. There's no levels of alliance. Certain factions will be able to ally with other factions. That's it. And I would say that you're allowed to ally with yourself. So, because obviously a CAD is a little bit restrictive. You're only allowed 3 of, 2 HQ, 3 elites, 3 heavy support, 3 fast attack, 6 troops. Imagine if you wanted that extra heavy support. Okay, well, have an allied detachment of Imperial Guard again. So you can take a guard CAD and a guard allied detachment. Okay? That allows people to keep sort of certain themes. So, for example, if you're a guard mech / armor commander, that will still allow you to take, your 4 heavy support choices and your 2 HQ tank choices. You'd have 6 slots plus 7 slots for tanks. So that's what I think would balance it. Okay. The next one would be to remove or severely tone down formations. Now, the reason for me suggesting this is very simple. Okay. Some formations are done right in 40k. Some formations are good. And some are outright broken and bullshit. Some effectively allow you to cheat. And I'll go over that in a second. So, an example of a formation done correctly is Ground Assault formation for the Tempest of Scions. So it's a large formation. You've got to take a significant number of units. And you have attacks for that, which is your Commissar. And it's balanced, and it works well because it just gives you, essentially, the turn you get out of your transports, you get twin linking. You don't get to fire twice. You don't get to fire then run. You don't get to fire, run, do some acrobats, stick your finger up the bum, win the game. You just get out, and it gives you, temporarily, a universal special rule. That's it. It adds, and for that you are giving up objective secured. That is balanced, because on the one hand you are no longer objective secured, which is still it's still semi-relevant. It's not the end of the world not being OBSEC, but it's still semi-relevant. You're giving up one rule and gaining essentially one rule. Okay, cool. An example of a formation that is over the top bullshit and done incorrectly is the Riptide Wing. The Riptide Wing has no tax, number one. It's just an advantage for taking units you'd already be taking, number two. You don't lose any advantages because you weren't OBSEC anyway, so you're still not OBSEC, so you don't lose anything. And instead it allows you to cheat, because it allows you to fire 4 times in your opening barrage or something crazy. 2 times, and then you double it with ripple fire 4 times. That's cheating. Fundamental 40k rule. You can fire in the shooting phase once. That's it. Riptide Wing allows you to fire 4 times in the shooting phase. That is cheating. No one else can do that. And this is an example of where formations that are wrong are ones that basically allow you to break the rules. And formations which are done right are ones that give you rules that already exist. Okay. So that's the issue. The Riptide Wing, very simply, that's the issue with the formations. Some just give you a minor buff, and some actively allow you to cheat. So how I would either just remove formations entirely. You know, they're not needed. If you remove formations, the game is still playable. Now I appreciate that some people may have invested a lot of money into formations, but don't forget those models that you've bought, you can still use them. If you've bought 4 Riptides or Riptide Wing, you can still use them under my 1 card, 1 ally detachment system. Simple as that. You know, no one's stopping you from still using your models. You'll just be using them in a different format. Riptides are really, really good still. You know, they're still, like 200 points for an amazing monsters creature. So you're still getting to use your very powerful monsters, but now they're powerful for standing on their own feet. They're not bullshit and powerful for being awesome already and then getting the shit buffed out of them. You see, all the suggestions I'm making are balanced, and they don't really affect people's armies or gameplay. It will reduce some people being able to take, like, you know, Super Friends or spam Riptides, but you'll still have those models and you'll still be able to use them in various armies. I'm not saying you're no longer allowed to use Azrael. I'm not saying get rid of Riptides. No, people have bought those models. People have invested in them. So I hope that so far you've seen that the suggestions I'm making are more, they're not nerfs, they're more just changes. That's what I've thought long and hard about this. So either remove them entirely or have a minor buff. So for example, if you took the Riptide Wing, you would lose obsec, so you've lost 1 rule. Maybe lose scoring entirely. That would be cool if you take if you had to have a formation. Formations could be part of, you know, obviously I'm saying you have said 1 card, 1 allied detachment. So yeah, but your formations I haven't explained this bit. You would take them as part of your CAD. So for example, a Riptide Wing requires 3 Riptides. Well, that would use up your elite slots, but because you've taken 3 of the same, you now have this formation. So formations would become part of CADs and allied detachments. Okay? This moves me on to my next thing, because you probably heard me say, well, if you took 3 Riptides, you'd use all your elite slots up, but you can take Riptides in squadrons of 3. My next point to balance the game would be to remove or reduce vehicle squadrons and monster creature squadrons, any squadrons. Some of you right now, some of you guard players are going to be like, what? What the fuck are you talking about? I have a 10 tank guard army. You know? You can't just take away all my tanks from me. Okay, calm the fuck down, number 1. I'm not taking all your tanks from you. Okay, calm down. Removing or reducing squadron sizes and effectiveness is to reduce spam. If we implemented the other changes where you had 1 card, 1 allied, removing formations, people would still find a way to break that. They'd still go, well, I might not be able to take formations anymore, but I can still take a squadron of 3 Rippies. Or, you know, I can still, you know, or people would be like, oh, well, it's unfair, you know, I've lost all my formations, but now, you know, guard can take like 9 tanks in a fucking, you know, 9 tanks plus 50, you know, 6 tanks can take 15 tanks in an army. You know, people, you know. So, by reducing or removing squadrons, it reduces spam. If suddenly the most Riptides you could face was 3, wouldn't it be the end of the world? You can kill 3 Riptides. It's tough, but you can bring them down. Enough las cannons, enough plasma, you can bring 3 Riptides down. Not easily, but it is doable. Oh look, what does that sound like? Balance. So, and likewise, you know, it would. Now there would obviously be some units that would be affected by this, like for example, the tank commander unit for Imperial Guard. that there would obviously be exceptions to the rule, because he has to take a buddy tank. Now, either he doesn't have to take a buddy tank, or he still is allowed to take one. And, there would be some exceptions to prove the rule. But that would be it. So if you had an allied detachment and a CAD as guard, you could take, let's say you just got rid of squadrons entirely, you could take 3 tanks in your heavy support section for your CAD, 2 tanks in your commander tanks. Then your allied detachment, you could take another tank HQ and another tank heavy support. You'd still be able to take 7 Lehman Russes. Not really fucking over your pure tank list in a 1500 point game. You're only looking about 10 Russes. You just have to take 3 Hellhounds or some. It would be a change. It would be a change, and not all changes are going to be welcome. But think of this in the broader spectrum. You'd still be able to get 7 of your Lehman Russes if change was implemented. You wouldn't be facing as many Riptides. You'd still be able to, field more tanks via the fast attack slot or via, chimeras. Still be doable. Okay. So the reason I would do that is to reduce spam. So you've got less things like mass Riptide spam. It would bring everything into line. Okay. It would just reduce spam. Now, the next point is, although that was an unexpected one, I don't think many people thought I would say that. The next one I would say is to reduce psychic powers massively. At the end of the day, Warhammer 40k is the difference traditionally between 40k and fantasy / Age of Sigmar. 40k was science fiction and fantasy was fantasy. Sword and sorcery. Keyword there, sorcery. 40k traditionally has been a game of shooting with a sprinkling of assault and some psychic powers thrown on top. But a little, the bulk of the meat, the chicken of the game was shooting. Now, psychic powers can easily be argued to be more potent in the right armies, more potent than shooting. Which is stupid. So stupid. Okay? So very, very stupid. Psychic powers should be a little buff. Because what you've got to remember is psychers are incredibly rare. Even in the Eldar, where you've got Farseers, which are like the pinnacle of Eldar psychic capabilities, and Warlocks are still rare individuals. Warlocks aren't common. Warlocks make up a seer council, for God's sake. Warlocks, they might be able, you might be able to go in for squad leaders, but in the fluff, Warlocks are rare as shit. And psychic powers, there are some direct damage psychic powers, like being able to, being able to shoot lightning out your fingers and stuff like that. But most psychic powers are fairly subtle. Most psychers have the, basic normal psychers sort of have the ability to, calm the nerves of their allies, or focus the minds of your squad leaders. Focus, brothers, take aim. That kind of stuff. So psychic powers shouldn't be like, oh, I've just created this whirlwind of bullshit, or I've just made an entire army invisible. Psychic powers aren't really. I mean, I guess there are rare exceptions, which that would be the case. I acknowledge that, I understand that, but generally, psychic powers and psychers themselves are incredibly rare. So, how would I reduce them? It's all well and good to say just reduce them, but how would I reduce them? Well, number one, I would reduce the amount of disciplines out there. Okay? I think there should just be big buck disciplines. Okay? I think there should be about 4 or 5 big book disciplines. That's it. And then each codex gets a psychic power table. Okay. And that's it. Maybe not even each codex is a psychic power table. Maybe there are just 4 or 5 or 6 psychic power tables in the main book, and then each codex is only allowed access to each one of those. So I know a lot of Eldar players would be like, what? No more guide? No more embolden? And it would be like, well, no. They would still exist, but they just go into the main book, and you'd have, like, call that the divination discipline. That's what Elder Psych is all about, divination. So we're like, here's the divination discipline. The Eldar have access to divination. Think about what Eldar use. They don't really use things to make like their guides, like iron arm and stuff like that. They use like foretelling. They foretell things, and divination is good at that. And you'd be like, well, Space Marines aren't really all about divination, are they? Space Marines are more like, well, I'm gonna inspire my battle brothers, or I'm gonna shoot lightning out my fingers. I'm gonna smite the enemy with psychic powers. So you'd be like, yo, you get access to the smiting psychic powers table. You know what I mean? Like, just giving every codex loads of different psychic powers would be, wouldn't work. It doesn't work currently. It gets abused to fuck. Let's just tone it down. Let's reset. Let's go back to basics. 5 to 6 disciplines in the main book, all balanced off against each other, all distinct. And then, some for, like Tyranids would have access to biomancy, for example, because they're biotic. They're organic. They should have the ability to increase the strength of their little gribbly gaunts, or pump in psychic energy to keep the counter effects from going down, so it has feel no pain. So Tyranids could have like access to like orcs could have access to biomancy, and like the smiting one, and then Eldar would have access to like divination, and maybe they wouldn't have access to biomancy, but maybe they'd have access to the smiting one, and then maybe Space Marines and Guard would be a little bit reduced, and they'd only get access to one or two. Like there should just be where there's 6 tables in the book, and each codex has access to 1 to 2 of those tables. That's it. And that would reduce psychic powers. Now, I'd also do generating warp dice. I wouldn't have where each psyker has warp charge and generates warp charge, and that way they can generate warp charge on warp charge, and you get demon lists which have got like 53 warp charges. Okay, fuck that. Psychic powers should just be, to be honest, I would say very similar to what it was in Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition. Okay? You roll 2 dice, and they're the number of warp charges you have. That's it. And your opponent gets the higher of the 2 dice rolls that you got. So if you roll a 5 and a 6, your opponent gets 6 dice, you get 11 dice. That would work. If you get a 1 and a 5, then you get 6 dice and your opponent gets 5 dice. Simple. That gives you a limited pool to do your dice from. That means you can't spam psychic powers. You can't make a psychic power, you can't make a warp charge mill either and just spawn millions and millions of horrors of Tzeentch. Yeah, sure, summon those horrors. Go for it. Guess what? They don't increase your warp charge. They just get to do their own thing. Now, I know some of you would say, well, this would fuck over. This would fuck, like, seriously fuck. Like demon armies. Suddenly, demons would get no shooting. Calm your tits. I've already thought of that. Demon shooting attacks should just, psychic powers should just go down back to shooting attacks. Simple as that. That way, your horrors are still useful, and then other people that I don't know demons very well, but I know that if you just gave them shooting attacks instead of psychic powers, I think demon players would be happy with that. Number one complaint I see about demon players is, well, my shooting, I have to warp charge it and then you can deny it. And it's like, well, no. Okay, cool. Just you know, let's assume that our horror of Tzeentch is perfectly capable of manifesting some fire out of the palm of his hands and throwing it at someone. You know, let's just assume that. So there you go. That's reducing psychic powers. Now, the last thing that I would say, what I think needs to fix the basic fundamental, or balance 40k, or, you know, fix the basic fundamentals of 40k. I'm not going to go through getting rid of individual things. The only individual rule that I would genuinely get rid of is invisibility. I think that power is too powerful. Before we move on, I just think invisibility should go. Just straight up, it's just stupid. Or it should be changed to -1 to hit. Because think about it, if you're on a battlefield and the enemy is invisible, okay, cool. But guess what? You're still going to see the grass moving or the dust being thrown up or everything. You're still going to see roughly where they are, not entirely invisible. So it should just be -1 to your ballistic skill, and you know, or -2 if you want. But that way it can be increased if you need it to. -1 or -2 or minus D3. Enemy units have minus D3 shooting at the unit. D3 ballistic skill. So maybe it's -1, maybe it's -3, but to a minimum of 1, obviously. So you know, if you get minus D3, it's basically it's a hit on 6s, or they're hitting on 4s, or they're hitting on 5s. Guard or guard are always going to be 5 or 6s. You know, to represent the fact that, you know, Space Marine were like, I have seen this trick before. Brothers, shoot here. So that's why they've got better ballistic skill. And guard, like, generally, they're like, where the fuck is it? Kind of thing. So there you go. That's how I would tone down visibility. Minus D3 ballistic skill, which can be improved using other things. Okay? Now, we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about fixing allies, or changing allies, which fixes abuse of 40k. We've talked about removing or reducing formations, and removing or reducing squadrons, which tones down spam. You know, because number 1 complaint people have is like allies is abused. Number 2 complaint is spam. Number 3 most common complaint is psychic powers are too powerful. Okay, well we've talked about how we'd fix that. So you wouldn't generate warp charge dice for each psych on the table. You'd roll 2d6. You get, you know, I've already explained that system. And psychic shooting would just go back to being a shooting attack. Okay, that's cool. Demon players will be happy. Everyone else will be happy. Balances things out. You still get your psychic powers, but you can't just spam as many as you want. Because the problem is that psychic powers at the moment, people can just get as many as they want. So we've talked about balancing allies, talked about balancing spam, we've talked about balancing psychic powers. Now, number 4 big gripe of people on the internet and in general is assault armies are weak. Assault armies are weak. Okay? How do we fix that? Well, I think there's 2 ways of fixing it. One way I'm 100% certain on, one way I'm not. The way that I'm 100% certain on is, I would say, no more removing casualties from the front. Instead, go back to 5th edition. The unit that's taking the damage, the controlling player picks the casualties. This represents, like, if the melter gunner guy dies, well, guess what? They're not going to leave the melter gun behind. The guy behind him picks it up. You know, to represent that the unit that is moving forward, maybe sprinting forward, has the momentum to sustain the push forward, to keep going. That means that assault players are no longer advancing 6 inches, getting blown back 2 or 3 inches. They're advancing 6 inches. End of discussion. Okay? Run move. Let's reduce, you know, people say there's too many dice rolls in 40k. Let's just say run move is you forgo your shooting, but instead get to make an additional move. Like flat out with vehicles, you know? That would be my run move. Just additional move. Not, you know, or that would be it. Just 6 followed by 6. That balances assault armies. You guys might be saying, wow, that's way too powerful. But think about this, guys. Think about this. Assault at the moment is in a bad place. We all know this. That is not reducing the firepower of anyone's armies out there. It's purely just making people able to move more. And that works for shooting armies too. What if you need to get close to your opponent to unleash a point-blank barrage? Yeah. That should be a thing. You should be able to move forward. You know, if you're going full tilt, if you're running, you are going really, really fast. You know, think of something sprinting. Maybe not. You know, I'm not too bothered about the run move being your full movement, but definitely the number one thing I'd say is you choose where the casualties go from. Take casualties from the back if you want. And the run move is the secondary one. And that I think, you know, the only other thing is I know people have the Games Workshop. One of the leaks they've released is that charging units would get to strike first, no matter what. I'm kind of on board with that idea actually for helping buff the assault. That would really buff the assault. But I wouldn't say no matter what. I would say, you know, if they haven't got assault grenades and they're charging into terrain, I think they should strike last. Okay? And if they have got assault grenades, then they get to strike first. You know, I think there's some tweaking and some balancing there. Like, if my guardsmen charge into Space Marine squad out in the open, then my guardsmen have got the momentum. They get to strike first. Cool. But if my guardsmen are trying to storm a defended position, think about this, like a big sandbag wall defended by, or a rampart defended by some Space Marines, then no, those Space Marines have got the advantage. I'm trying to fight over that cover. I'm spending think about this if you're in real life. You're trying to fight someone past sandbag wall. You're spending about half of your effort to get over the sandbag wall. So, you know, you shouldn't be striking first unless you've got assault grenades, in which case you know blowing bits off the wall, keeping the enemy's head down. Yeah, that's it. That's what I do. That's it, guys. That's what I would do to fix or to help balance 7th edition going forward for 8th edition. So let's just go through it quickly. Fix allies. 1 CAD, 1 allied detachment, no battle bros. Represents 2 distinct forces working together, but not all intermingled. Helps reduce super friends. Helps reduce invisible Death Stars. Remove or reduce formations. Currently, certain formations effectively allow you to cheat. You can fire 4 times in the shooting phase. You can run and shoot and assault and blah, 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 blah. No. Let's stop formations from breaking the basic core rules. Formation should not break the basic core rules. That if you are losing OBSEC or losing scoring entirely, then you should get a basic 1 or 2 universal special rules. Maybe twin linking and pinning, for example. Let's reduce spam. You know, if people aren't. We don't want people to still be able to spam like 9 Riptides or 15 Lehman Russes, whatever. Reduce the spam. No more squadrons or maximum squadrons of 2. But I would say just remove squadrons. Psychic powers at the moment. Let's balance those out. Let's reduce the such a huge variety of psychic powers. There are 6 basic tables in the main book. Each faction has access to 1 to 2 of those tables, depending on their kind of faction. So, for example, Tyranids, Biomancy, Eldar, Divination. Okay. Also, reduce the number of warp charges that people have by just rolling 2d6 at the beginning of the psychic phase. The controlling player gets both dice, and the denying player gets 1 of those dice, the highest dice. So if you roll a 5 and a 6, the casting player would get 11 and the defending player would get 6. And don't generate additional warp charges from the number of psychics you have. And make psychic shooting just shooting again. Demon players will be happy. And finally, let's buff the assault. Controlling player chooses where casualties come from. Maybe have striking first in combat. And there's one that I can't remember. Run as well. Run should just be your movement. But you can't. But you can't assault afterwards. That's it. So tell me what you guys think. It's a long video. I appreciate that. Tell me what you guys are thinking. Tell me if you agree or disagree. Bear in mind, I wasn't targeting anything specific here. These were the broad brush, general game ideas that should be fixed for 8th edition, in my opinion. But I'm really eager to see what you guys think. Okay? Really eager to hear what your opinions are. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Or do you have your own opinions? So thank you for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time.